We are so glad that you are here today. Today is Saturday, and today is a special edition of this program because of the emotional feelings that we all are going through right now. We know our nation is mourning for almost 30 people who were found dead because of a stampede that took place. And so today's program, we will be looking at the truth about the Liberian stampede deaths. And I'm so glad that you tune in today. And please don't forget to share this link with your friends, your family, and your relatives. As you know, the podcast is here every Saturday. My name is Alexander Red, and I'm always here with my co-host, Reverend Suah as Deddeh. And today we have our special guest, and he is Mr. Stanford Bush Chicken Peabody. And he is a former publisher, that is a former publisher of the Bush Chicken magazine, and currently he's a consultant in the um, agro agro business. That is the agricultural business in Liberia. He's a consultant, and he will be here to make all of us to make sense out of what really occurred in Nuclear Town. And we all are aware of the incident. And when tragedy as a whole strikes, our first reaction is an emotional response of shock. Although it is challenging to adapt to life tragedies when you have lived so long or lived enough to experience various trials and tribulations, and your immediate emotional reaction seems to whine because you take a deep breath and look back, and then you because you've been there, done that, and so you have a lot of questions in your mind. Nevertheless, your reactional response is more of a line of reasoning with questions to know why such tragedy happened. And we would like to also know what happens or who is involved and where did it happen. Those questions come up even in a journalist's mind. But the nagging question here is what caused the death of Christian worshippers who attended a crusade held at a local stadium in Newtown? Now, these questions are typically the results of what? Last Wednesday's stampede, in which, according to media reports, at least 30 people died in that borough of Newtown. Now, there are various reactions to this tragedy. Some blame the Zogos, and the Zogos are a ragtag of displaced young people who allegedly feed on recreational drugs for themselves or to feed themselves, and they arm themselves with machetes or knives. And from what we hear so far, they intended or they were trying or attempting to rob the attendees at the crusade. Now, in contrast to what happened, others blame the worshippers for being so gullible into believing they could be healed or delivered from satanic influence in a flash through a divine power of a prophet named Abraham Cromar. Now, some conclude that the crusade is a conspiracy hatched by the prophet Cromar to get together with his loyalists so that they could cause panic, so that the blood of those deceased people or worshippers could be served as relevance for human sacrifice to appease the deity. As we anticipate the president of the country, George Weah's national address on Monday to the nation, Liberians are emotionally gripping with grief and anxiety over the victims and their families. Moreover, most people are critical of the government's agencies, such as the Environmental Protection Agency, drug enforcement, and local city leaders for failing to apply regulatory safety measures or guidelines. So the question comes or becomes, what's next? When will the Liberian police bring closure to their investigation of this stampede incident? And the truth is that we must look at the entire matter or the incident to see what stands out. And what stands out from this whole incident is this: why blame the Zogos? Why make the Zogos to be or to appear as a being or menace or threat to the community or societal peace and stability? And if the Zogos are to blame for the stampede or the deaths, what could have been done to prevent the Zogos from committing robbery? Or is it fair to blame the DEA, that is the Drugs Enforcement Agency, and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, for failing to curtail what should have been the obvious? Or why is there so much drugs flowing in the country and the DEA or the Drugs Enforcement is not doing anything about it to stem the flow? We know and we are aware that illicit drugs are messing up the minds or the psychological mindset of our young people, and it is a concern. But we all know that there are men within our country, especially public servants, who are standing up to speak against this. And they want to make sure that those Zogos or those displaced young people receive the necessary rehabilitation. And so we will also, as part of this program, we will be taking a look at Senator Darius Dillon's doctrine of Zoko's rehabilitation and many more coming up. So if you're just joining us, we'd like to say welcome to Gracious Hope Podcast. That's a podcast here on KMTV. And of course, I'm so glad to bring in my co-host here, Reverend Suah Deddeh, as always. Reverend Deddeh, this is a mouthful for us to be discussing here today. It is a sad day, and we are mourning those victims, their families that are grieving. And it is just hard to swallow and to see a country degrading in that way. Reverend Deddeh.
Yeah, sure. But in any case, this is the day the Lord has made. No matter what it is, we're going to rejoice and be glad in it because God knew this time was coming and He allowed it to happen. Again, whatever God allows to happen, He always has His way of taking us through those circumstances. And again, my heart bleeds for my brothers and sisters, my country men and women for this tragedy that has occurred. It kind of makes me sad because those people went to serve God, to seek God's face through the person who said they represented God in terms of being a pastor. And some of the allegations I'm hearing, I don't even want to give light to them in the meantime because people have a way of accusing people. Blood, the pastor had a crusade with a motive, the rest of that. I don't want to believe that until the truth comes out because I would not want to bring a pastor to that level of having a crusade just to get blood. I would not support that in the meantime until the truth comes out. But again, I'm asking myself several questions right now about the venue, the capacity of the venue, how many persons could fit the venue. Did they allow too many people to fit a small venue for the crusade? Was there sufficient security for the venue? And I'm glad the government is investigating the matter. Things that happened on Thursday, I guess, on Wednesday, and the president visited the place on Thursday. And I know the police carrying out the investigation now. I don't want to be too fast to say the delay because it takes time to get down to the bottom of this issue. But my
Mhm.
concern is, was there security in the place, sufficient security in the place? Was that permit given for this crusade to be held in that place and with one small way out? So these are things that I've been thinking about since Wednesday when I heard this news and up to now. But I believe the government will get down to the bottom of this. And I thank God for the president for declaring 3 days of fast. I would have said 1 week of fast because this is a serious matter. But 3 days where people will seek God's face, ask for forgiveness, and ask for direction on how to approach these things when they happen in the country is a good way to go. So I thank God for the president for seeking, going that path. The last thing I want to say, not last thing, but another thing I want to mention is we are hearing different news about the Zogos causing this issue to happen. They came with machetes. I listened to the information minister. I listened to the spokesman for the police, and all of them pointing to the Zogos. So if that's the issue of the Zogos, then what is being done to deal with this issue of the Zogos so that this would not repeat itself? So this amount of questions I have, I know our guest today might not answer all these questions, but he himself trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
But I'm glad he's here, and I want to welcome Stanton. Peabody, I don't know, bush chicken or chicken bush, which one it is.
Yeah, we are so glad to have him here.
Yeah.
And it's a morning day, a sad day, and I believe the president took the right step in the right direction by declaring the 3 days of mourning. And he is also, going to be speaking to the nation on Monday, as I was told by the manager at KMTV. And they will be carrying his speech very live, and want to hear what the president is going to say to the grieving hearts of people. Because as commander in chief of the people of the country, I believe your words of consolation will somehow help to
Yeah.
appease that anger or that grief. And if anything that the government can do, who knows? He might develop a new policy that he might be sending to the legislature to do something about it. And that is why it is important that we'll be taking a look at Senator Darius Dillon's doctrine of rehabilitation, and he is pretty much laser focusing on the young people because he saw the danger ahead. And of course, if you're just joining us, we'd like to say welcome. And if you have any comments, you want to opine, please feel free to write your comments, and we appreciate that. So, without much ado, we are so glad to have our guest here, Mr. Stanford Bush Chicken Peabody, publisher, former publisher, and now he is a consultant in the agro business. And so, welcome, Mr. Peabody.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Thank you
Yeah,
very
so
much.
you're welcome. So we are all taken aback by what is going on in our country. The latest incident with the stampede of almost 30 deaths. I hear some reports about 29, some say less, some say 30. And if it is about 30 deaths, 19 will be adults, and I believe 11 children, from what I've heard so far. So give us a sense of idea. What you on the ground in Liberia? What have you been hearing, and how is the police investigation going on? And we haven't seen anything published yet to see the victims, to know whether how many children. And I'm just taking it off the media. But what is going on right now? Please update us. What have you learned, Mr. Peabody?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on the show. You know, and just like you have heard a lot of conjecture about what actually happened in Yucatan, my
Mhm.
heart goes out to the people of Yucatan and those who lost their lives. Uh, I would like to just make sure that we're not down, we're not downplaying the incident. We're not trying to judge what happened at the incident. We're just trying to make a sense of what happened. And I want to say this, that it would be good to have an investigation or a report out, right? The main
Mhm.
things that I think I mentioned that before was how many people died, right?
Mhm.
How many people died from the stampede? So let's assume that there are 30 people who died, right? 11 kids were among them. How many people died from knife or cutlass injuries? How many people died from being trampled upon? That report may come from the police. It may also help them to say um, the people who died, were any of them killed by knives, or were any of them killed by machetes, or to find out how did the Zogos attack and where did the crowd come from? Because there are a lot of people who are now blaming the church. There are a lot of people who are blaming the Zogos. Some people are already now saying that we should go out and kill all the Zogos. The Zogos are also victims, right? So we have to be methodical about this incident that actually happened. How did it happen so that we can avoid it in the future? For example, I mentioned today that all the churches in Liberia now are putting speakers outside, right? They're using open fields outside to,
Mhm.
to, to have these programs. The Environmental Protection Agency is not just to protect swamps, they also to protect the trash and noise in the environment. But what are they doing about that? I've had incidents of a church putting a speaker to my window almost, and I mean they have their rights, but I have rights too. So that field in Yucatan, there are people who have rights to be in peace, but their rights were not taken into consideration when that event was planned. You see, and this is an issue that, as a matter of fact, for that size of a crowd, did they get a permit? Are they required to get a permit? If that field can hold, let's say 500 people, from my estimation, there are about maybe 2,000 people on that field from what I saw on the videos.
Hmm.
So how are they making sure the regulations that are already there are being enforced? The EPA may not be doing that because there are a lot of noise trash. People selling music, people putting speakers out. Telling you that if some of the regulations currently on the books in the country were enacted, most of these things would not happen. Those people would not have been able to gather at that rate, to have been stampeded and people die.
Mhm.
It would have been hard for it to happen because it just wouldn't happen because you have to go and get a permit. You have to make sure the field is good for a certain amount of people. I mean, so many things will be taken care of. But
Yeah.
in the
So
absence of that, you
yeah.
see,
So
these are the things that
go ahead. I want to know why people. I want to know whether they got a permit from the EPA, that is the Environmental Protection Agency. Just how when people are ready to protest, they normally go
right,
to the Ministry of Justice for permit.
right, exactly.
Did they
Yes.
get a okay?
No, I
Did they
don't. I
get
don't. I
permit?
don't want to. I don't want to believe that there was any, because this is not political. In a sense, it's not political. They may not have gotten a permit to go there because there's so many churches having crusades and tarries and everything else. I don't think anybody is going to get any permit for that kind of thing. But I'm just saying that we cannot put the blame squarely on a church, on Pastor Kroma. And again, we cannot put the blame squarely on the Zogos. How many Zogos attacked that crowd of 5,000? The
Wow.
fact is that, again, the Zogos are victims. Tell me, The new drug in Liberia, K2 spice, very dangerous drug. Is that grown locally? It's a processed and manufactured drug. How is it entering Liberia? How are people, children getting to be Zogos in this country? So we say, oh, Zogos, let's go kill all of them. But before, maybe Zogos used to be of a certain group, but now there are a lot of people I know whose children are now Zogos. And besides that, I've traveled to Grand Bassa County, number 3. It's a Zogo community there. In Buchanan, there is a Zogo community. There are many Zogo communities there. In Ganta, everywhere you go, you have drug addicts in these little enclaves, and they are growing, they are multiplying. Before, the only ghetto I knew was on Gurley Street, right in that corner on Gurley Street when we were growing up. Now, you know how many ghettos and Zogo communities they have in Liberia right now? In Monrovia, I mean,
No.
ELWA King Gray, you know, you go to Oro, you go to Bonar Beach area. Everywhere you go, there are enclaves where children get supplied drugs, where they are. So if we're supposed to kill all those Zogos, you know what it means, but people who are yelling, let's kill all of them, let's kill all of them. There are a lot of people.
Stanford, let's go back to the issue of what happened on Wednesday, the stampede. Because I heard you saying the Zogos are victims. Now, all of those who are watching this broadcast today are not Liberians, so
exactly.
They may not understand why when we say Zogos, what we mean by that. So I hope you give some clarity to that. But then I want you to be a little clearer when you mean the Zogos are victims. When we're talking about the Zogos, the government says they were the ones who came with the machetes and knives and the rest of that. The police mentioned that. Other reporters mentioned that, and now we're seeing the Zogos are victims. So how do we balance the issue of those who have died and try to say the Zogos are victims? Will you just deal with that a little bit?
Well, there are victims, not in a sense, like trying to compare them with the people who died in the incident. But what I'm saying is that when people talk about the resolution of what happened, right? The people who they're saying caused the mayhem, they are also victims. That's what I meant.
Yeah, like how? That's why.
What I'm saying is so. For example, this is how I understand the stampede happened. Right? It's after the crusade, and people in the thousands are going home, and then the head of the crowd meet up with a group of Zogos who then start to harass the crowd and take their phones and take things from them, right? That crowd in front is so terrified, they turn around and run back to the crusade. That running back to the crusade, it caused a lot of deaths too. What I would want to know is, these Zogos terrified the people in front, because if you listen to some people, you would think that all the people in the crusade died only from knife wounds, from machetes and everything else. See? And those people who caused this mayhem, they're not normal people. They're not like you and myself in Liberia trying to make a living. No, these people are drug addicts. They're on the streets. They're looking for a way to steal phones. They're looking for a way to steal money, and they're looking for a way to make a life. So, and who are they? What have we done to reduce that crowd? We have done nothing. As a matter of fact, that Zogo crowd is increasing. That's what I mean.
Wow.
So who are Zogos? Who are Zogos? I just want the viewers and the listeners to understand who are, because we keep saying Zogos.
As a matter of fact, I even apologize for using that word Zogos, because I don't use that word anymore. But if I were to use any word, I would say like vulnerable youths, vulnerable adults, vulnerable in the sense that they have taken drugs and the drugs have overcome them. Some of them have become very addicted to these drugs to the point that they don't want to go home. They are homeless. They live in these places where normal human beings would not live. You see, so that's when you say Zogos in Liberia, it means actually like drug addicts. Wow. Drug addicts that can't even control their addiction anymore. They're in the streets. They're sleeping on the streets. They're sleeping in gutters. They're sleeping in makeshift places. They are almost like subhumans. That's what they are. You see, and these people we are referring here tonight are people that Some people used to call family. Some people used to call brothers. They are not even girls. Zogolis.
Mhm.
Sorry, my current just left. So
Liberia,
yeah,
electricity, LEC. But this is a very serious problem, Reverend Deddeh. And I believe that if people can reduce, if the young people can reduce themselves to that level of sleeping in the gutters or sleeping at the cemetery and
right.
feeding on drugs, I believe that we must look at the root of the problem. Where do they get the drugs from? How do they get money to get the drugs? And how are the drugs coming in the country? So then one might conclude that it falls on the lap of another government agency, which is the drugs enforcement. Are they having any statistics to show that they have arrested, drug dealers or those who bring in drugs in the country? Or, but I look on our website, I didn't see any case against anybody. I didn't read anything as such. So I'm not sure what is the DEA doing. That is a drug enforcement arm of the government. Do you have any take on that, Mr. Peabody?
Well, actually, after I start to go through this, I visited. It's a UN website, and they're actually um, Mr. Samuel Jackson posted something on Facebook, so I went to see whether I could find some information. But there's a UN agency that is actually helping the DEA fight
Hmm.
drugs and crimes in West Africa. I also posted a link about the UN finding that West Africa, including Liberia, has become a hub of trade for drugs. But what you would not hear in Liberia is that there have been drugs confiscated at the RIA, or there have been drugs confiscated at the Freeport of Monrovia. What you hear is that my Esther in Pinsville, oh, they raided our woman today and they took her away. She was selling, drugs. That's it. But the kind of drugs that are coming into Liberia, they're not drugs that my Esther can grow in her backyard. Those drugs are hardcore drugs. K2
Hmm.
spice, tramadol. Tramadol is used in the developed world for putting large animals like horses to sleep before operations and things like that. That's why our children are taking. So nobody
Yes.
is actually saying, or giving any information. If you go there, you'll not find any information about the drug trade except on the UN website. You see?
Yes.
So yeah, so that's just my issue. That's all.
Yeah, and that's a dangerous drug. And I was just looking at it here online. The K2 spice drug that they are using is a cannabinoid. It's like marijuana. It is synthetic, and yeah, it is all human-made, mind-altering chemicals that are either spray on dry, shredded plant material. So they
Right.
use it to spray on the
It
marijuana to
doesn't
make.
even have to be marijuana. You just spray that thing on any plant. You would think you're smoking marijuana, but actually, it's
Yeah,
not marijuana.
it is mind altering, and it is very dangerous. And this brings us to the whole concept about the Dillon's doctrine. Okay, Senator
Right.
Dillon, when he started running, he made it a priority to get the disadvantaged youth, those who cannot help themselves. As you know, the war shattered the lives of families. Okay, and families were disintegrated. As a result, kids started to grow on our own, and now they were, in fact, put into various factions to fight and kill. Now they are grown on their own. The war, there's no more war. And so they have to feed themselves, they have to feed their family, and some of them in the process also got children. And how would they feed them? And they get frustrated, and some of them, they get on drugs, or even they were doing drugs during the war. So then this senator saw that he saw the danger and the need that look around us. Around us here, we see young people sleeping in a cemetery. They are dirty and they cannot take care of themselves. What can we do as responsible citizens, as leaders? And so he launched a whole idea about rehabilitation, and he received a lot of donation from people, both in Liberia and abroad. And he has his center. And I know you understand what I'm talking about here, Mr. Peabody. Can you throw more light on this whole rehabilitation that Senator Dillon is doing in order to help those disadvantaged young people?
I really applaud the efforts of Senator Dillon, right?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Senator Dillon is supposed to appear at my church tomorrow to speak to some disadvantaged and vulnerable youth that are in the ministry that I head, the men's ministry of House of Prayer Intercessory Ministries. He's supposed to go there and make a talk. But what I'm saying is that um, Senator Dillon's effort is like trying to wipe off uh, the floor with water, a floor that has been wet by 10 drums of water, and you're using a small towel to wipe
Hmm.
that floor. Because as Mr. Dillon helped them get in there to feed them and try to rehabilitate them, on the backside, there are more than 10 or 20 or 30 zogos being made every day because of the drugs that are coming into the country. So we
Hmm.
hear about Mr. Dillon's effort. We hear about the church, effort. But what are you really hearing? When was the last time you heard about an interdiction of drugs at the RIA or the Freeport or diplomatic pouches? When? How are we getting tramadol in this country? Nobody really using tramadol to do anything. How are we getting K2? Imagine K2 is a concoction of chemicals sprayed on plant-like material. Now it looks
Yeah.
like marijuana. It's not marijuana, and it's mind altering. Let's assume that three or four, five disadvantaged or vulnerable youth took some K2 on the night of that incident. What do you think would have happened? Maybe they're the ones who went ahead and said, "Look, we need some phones to sell, and we need
Hmm.
some phones to sell now. Let's go. Let's that they can call that kind of crowd. They call it a junkie crowd, donkey crowd, because they
Hmm.
don't have time to fight for themselves. They're not going to attack them when they're attacked. There's a junkie crowd. They can just come and take anything they want, and all those people will be running helter skelter. And that's why I call on the police to do an adequate investigation. How many people were killed? How many people were killed by machetes and knives, or even maybe shot? And how many
Yeah.
people were actually killed by the stampede? See these amount of people who were there. So if all 30 people were killed, were they? I mean, like it would be good for the police to make that report, and also for the DEA to start making some reports on on the seizure of drugs coming into the country, whether the Freeport, because there's no information on that either. You see,
Hmm.
and then for the
My
EPA,
thing, my thing is on the whole issue. If you went in a crowded theater and shouted fire, and people
right,
flee, you are a
right,
culprit for that the incident. So
exactly,
the Zocos might have their own issue of being drug addicts, but the fact that they prompted this whole thing happening, it really requires an investigation. Whether they were killed by machetes or by whatever. Once they came to that place and people were fretting because
hmm,
of what tools they had in their hand, whether machetes or
yes,
cutlasses or knives, and they came in numbers to that place, they caused this thing to happen. We got to face that because if they had not come, this issue would not have happened. Besides the crowd control, police presence, or security presence, we have to face the reality that their presence in that place caused this thing to happen. Now, the fact that they are being neglected is one thing. We have to take it of them. I have no issue with that. We have to really pay attention to them because these children are the results of the civil wars in Liberia. Some of these children grew up during the civil war, so they knew nothing but violence. So that's what I thought when you meant by saying they are victims. That's what I thought you would have said. But then my thing is, I see where you're coming from in terms of being them being victims. The fact that they were not responsible for the war starting in Liberia. They were born at kids during the war, and they grew up knowing violence. That's one thing. But when it comes to the issue on Wednesday, I mean, they caused this thing to happen by their presence. I mean, that's how I see it. Because if they are
right,
not cast on Stanford and Ellis, this thing would never happen. And again, if there was security posted at the entrance, maybe they would not have had a chance to enter. So there are a lot of things that have to be investigated for to come to the bottom of this situation to see what happened, what caused this, so that we kind of not allow it to happen again. That's just my little take on it on Stanford and Alex.
right. Thank
Hmm.
you, Reverend Deddeh. The only thing about that is to say this was caused by Zogos is the easiest route possible for any investigation to take. So the Zogos instigated the stampede. So what next? We're gonna find those ones in Yucatan, and what we're gonna do with all of them. What we're gonna do with them. I mean, yeah, the Zogos did it. That's easy to say. Let's find the head of the Zogos and who did it, and let's put them in jail. Easy. So the solution will never, the report, I can tell you now that that report, it would be easy because if they say that Zogos, the problem solved, we can't find the Zogos that they be accusing. That's the
Mhm.
issue. There will be no substantial criminal to indict in this situation. But
Uh-huh.
go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and even if the Zog, if the whoever is a corporate or who are the corporates, if they are arrested, be it the Zogos or the disadvantaged youths or drugged youths who did that and put in jail or prison, we know that the prison system is also not a good place.
Right.
And I understand that Senator Dillon is also uh, looking forward to introducing a legislature, in fact, to take a hard look at that budget that is allocated for the prison system. They have there not rehabilitation, but for food. So the full money that is being used, about $200,000. Okay, how is that money spent? Because when a kid comes from doing his time in prison, he is not going through any rigorous rehabilitation work. That is to be reintroduced or ushered into the community. So when he comes out of jail or prison, he just goes back in the community. Guess what he's going to do? He's going to do the same old thing. So then we are just doing a recycling thing here. And the
Exactly.
thing is that I'm not sure whether the government has a very good, effective, and efficient rehabilitation program that we can, count on and say, yes, if someone is guilty by the law and sent to jail or prison, that person should be treated with dignity and respect, the same way all the rights under the law. And when he or she completes the time, there should be a program of rehabilitation to be reintroduced in a society.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
such is none. And that is where the recycling effect comes in. And this is where Senator Dillon is concerned as well as part of that rehabilitation program that he's fostering.
I would be
That's
the
true.
one.
That's true. I agree. I agree with what you're saying, Alex. And this is why I keep making this point. If we know the issues of Zogos exist, we keep saying Zogo. I think we may disadvantage youth.
Right.
Yeah, because honestly, when you keep saying Zogo, Zogo, I can just
Yeah.
where did this name come from? Zogo. Who coined this name Zogo? So I forgive me, but I'll try to. I mean, leave that word. I would say disadvantage youth of the country, people who need attention so that people can see exactly what we're talking about. So if we have these issues of our youth who are disadvantaged, who need attention, and it's not happening, and we know that like my brother or Stanford said, the issue is almost all over the country. It's just the situation. Then one, we try to focus on that issue. The second thing is if we know these people are around and they find donkey, I don't call donkey group and the rest of that because they can't
Yeah.
defend themselves, then make sure you have security at a large gathering to avoid people coming that will cause stampede as we have now, to avoid death that we have now. So I'm just throwing this questions in my mind and the rest of that. I see where you're coming from, Stanford, and I see where Ellis is coming from. I'm trying to find what solution are we going to find in this situation because it might happen again. And when it happens again, what do we say to ourselves? Will we say, "Oh, we missed the signs and the rest of that"? What substantive and concrete actions are taken to avert those kind of situations from happening? This is what I keep coming back to because I don't want to leave the crusade situation because if a crusade situation had not happened, we wouldn't be having this discussion about the stampedes, okay, where people were killed, trampled on the rest of that. It is sad. It is sad. Stanford, it's very sad to
Yeah,
see
that's true.
we are discussing the kind
But
of situation.
Reverend Deddeh, the thing about it is that all the things to prevent what happened, all all the things to prevent what happened. Actually, many of the regulations are on the books. Many are on the books. If you call the EPA just now and ask them about noise, about trash, smoke, swamp, they will tell you all the regulations around those things because those things are actually um, environmental hazards, right? They will tell you, but they don't protect. In my community, they don't protect people from the noise of speakers or people who sell music and all that. Now, if you go back to the amount of people who that D12 field can hold, maybe it can hold 1,000 or 1,005. I think there are about maybe 3,000, 4,000 on the field, or maybe more. If those people or the church or every church, there's some regulation to say like if we're supposed to be hosting people like the same way they do the politics, a certain amount of people can come here. Otherwise, they have to pay the police. The police can go there or private security to make sure the exits and the entrances are secured. There are regulations for that. I mean, my point is that before we even get to the Zogos and all that, or to the disadvantaged youth, before we even get there, there are regulations for everything that could have stopped what happened. So all we have to do is to go back and say, like,
Mhm.
um, we're going to now, going forward, implement all the regulations that have to do with gatherings,
Mhm.
or we will implement all the issues that got to do with the import and the importation of drugs, increase the penalties and the fines and the sentences and all that. We have to step on those things. Same way they try to do the rape thing, because rape was getting very endemic in our society. At that time, Ellen saw it and she tried to do something right now. Many of those rapists, especially men, are afraid, even though there's still some sick people continuing, but they're afraid because the crime of rape has a heavy sentence. And
Mhm.
there are people, AFL and other people, who are making sure that it's not just an easy thing to get away with. Same thing with all these other things that we're talking about. So there must be a concerted effort by those functionaries and agencies of government to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Let them implement the regulations that are already there. There's nothing need to be done besides implement regulations that are there. People can, people for 300 era can gather. I mean, even if you go to some churches now, graduations, as a matter of fact, that are just happening. I'm not even talking about charities, and people can only get in a $200 occupancy place. There are about 600 people there.
Mhm.
I can even take you back to the traffic. You will see that they will say, I think I mentioned that today, you will see that they say, oh, there was a nasty accident on a highway. People died. 10 people died. And it was a dilapidated truck. It didn't even have any brakes. Then the next day, you will see that there are more than 500 dilapidated trucks still on the road.
A row, yes. And I
See?
see that, and that, of course, is a responsibility that falls on the shoulders of the DEA, that's the drug enforcement,
Right.
to see how they can have much better control over the flow of drugs in the country in collaboration with the immigration service, as well as the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. I don't think they are only responsible to take care of the trash or to let the trash out of the place or around the city alone or
Mm-hmm.
trash control. What's about noise pollution? And I
Exactly.
understand there are loud crusades these days. If in your neighborhood, someone just come and put out speakers up, and then they
Yeah.
just blast the whole place,
Right.
and it disturb neighbors and those people who have prior engagement, like meeting or anything to their house or their
Right.
homes. They want to rest, they can rest, but I
You
think they
can't.
should be respected too. So they should look into noise pollution as well as not just. In fact, this whole APA, I still see a lot of pictures of trash in Pennsville, other areas still. So I'm not sure if that is budget problem or inefficiency or what is going on at those agencies, but it is something that we all can examine, we all can talk about, and we all can bring to the fore what is wrong and that can be made right. And it is my hope, okay, it is my hope that President we at tomorrow's address, that is not tomorrow, but Monday, he will be addressing the nation. And I hope he will develop some sort of policy, maybe in addition to actually enforce some of these codes or regulatory codes for gathering in public places, or for maybe certain regulation about how to control the crowd when it's time for event, or maybe develop a policy more that is stringent on rehabilitation for those who are found guilty and sent to the prison system. When they come out, there should be a viable rehabilitation program in order to be reintroduced in a society or in a various community. And when it comes to the treatment of these victims, so those who are already feeding their entire livelihood on drugs, yeah, they should have some sort of rehab program supported by the government to help. It is something that we should, urge the government to do. I know government does not have the eyes to be everywhere like God. Government is not God. Government is not God. Yes, God put them in place and ordained them according to Romans chapter 13, and we are to see them as God's ministers, that is servants. They are servants as well, but we have to respect them and also obey by following those rules or laws that are on the books, because they should be fair enough for each and every one of us. But at the same time, we see not just what happened or the stampede as a whole. We should look at a much bigger picture. I understand that Samuel Jackson, in that piece that he wrote on Facebook, he's been around for a long time. He's an economist, from what I heard. But he said that orderliness, God is a God of not of confusion but of order. But he was mainly emphasizing on how things are not in order. The laws on the books, yes, but they are not enforced in the right way. For example, two-way lane or three-way lane, somebody driving, oh, you on your lane, somebody driving opposite. And when they ask you, you know who I am, government official, even breaking the codes or the rule regulation. And so we have to look at a society, build a society where we all can live according to the rules and regulations, and let people live and live in peace. And beyond the disadvantaged youth and all the crime that they commit against people, let us look beyond that and look at other people who are toting gun and knives or machetes in the various community committing crime and burglarizing people home. Look at Rufus Berry. His generator room was bust up this morning. It was on Facebook. Okay. What if he had come out to confront those people who were trying to steal away his generator or his gas? Who knows? He would have been hurt. So safety is an issue, and we cannot have a viable or a viable or vibrant economic society when the environment is not safe. And it is a constitutionally mandated duty of the government to provide an enabling environment or atmosphere so that people can feel safe, they can feel secure, and investors can be what attracted. Well, investors are not attracted to a place where the justice system is fragile, when justice is perverted. Who is going to take responsibility? So we have a whole lot of problem here, a lot of problems that we have to look at ourselves and look inwardly, those who are serving on a leadership level, and not just the government, because the government, yes, we all look up to government to bring change, but what about ourselves? What about our immediate community, the church? We're part of a church. What, in fact, what are the churches doing about the quote unquote Zocos, the disadvantaged? Do they have any rehab programs? Are they helping? Mr. Peabody?
Well, there are a couple of, let's say, I mean, I know one church that's doing that. The House of Prayer Intercessory Ministries of Mother Jatu, she's doing that. She's rehabilitated a lot. But like, and well, Mr. Darius Dillon and some other rehab centers in, I think, Smell No Taste, Maghibie County. But like, what if, whether they're several other ones that are popular for people to go to, I can't tell you. I can tell you. I can't tell you much about that.
But
I
what's
don't
about
think so.
the rule of law? Do you think things are out of hand, that people are not just obeying the law, people just doing everything unto themselves or acting law unto themselves, even from those who are serving both in government and out of government, or are they serving as an example so that other people can know that there are rules and regulations that they should follow?
Well, like it's not the hard law being broken. Do not kill, and then somebody kill and want to get away with that. It's just the small things. It's just the small things for grown-ups and government officials and other people in leadership. Just the small things to show as examples so people will follow. Don't go in
Hmm.
the third lane, right? Stand in the line if you go in the bank. There are small things that people just don't do, not necessarily only government officials. There are other people who just don't do it to show a sign of civility. Like, when we leave from here, we go to the States and you see it. If you're supposed to stand in the bus line, you stand in the bus line. But people come from the States, they come here. Other people who are here, they just don't do those simple things. So it's not just about the big things about thou should not steal, thou should not kill, but all the other small things that we just, we don't have the time for. So those are also the things that, like in my brother say, small, small make big, big. So in Liberia, you don't worry about small, very small. Then you be worried about big. Like it just don't work like that. You see, so we have to try and see how we can institute some measure of you know um, knowledge about what is right, not what is legal. What is legal is is minute, but what is right, you know, what is right, and then we do it. If you
Mm.
see an old lady in the bus, there's no law to say you should stand up, but it's right that you stand up and give her the seat. If you see a woman drop something and you're there, there's no law to say help her to pick it up, but it's only right that you help her, to pick it up. I mean, just simple things. I mean, that's how I would say, because if I have to go on the other side about the legality, now then that's a whole no whole
And yeah,
different
and
thing.
just quickly before Reverend Deddeh comes in, I know he wants us to actually talk about what happened at Stampede. Now, who is this Prophet Chroma? What
Well,
do you know about him?
what I know about him is that in Liberia, it's prophets, people who do deliverance, people who can tell you that your tomorrow will be well.
Hmm.
You know, people who that's your mantle for you to take it home and know that your future will be bright. Those people gain a lot of traction because you know one thing my friends and I noticed in Liberia, when times are very good, when times are good, women have enough food on the table, men can bring some money home, the bars and the clubs are packed. But as soon as times get bad, the churches become full. And those pastors who can provide some level of uh, revival to the soul of all those people who are feeling bad, those pastors become powerful and well known. Whether they're whether they are how you call it, whether they're truly representing the issues of God, I can't say. Yeah.
Yeah, I know we can't be the
So
judge, but we
that's
can
I mean that's
discern.
what I
God
can
has
put in
given.
a nutshell.
That's a, but God has given you the
Right.
spirit of discernment
Yes.
as a whole,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and that is where the danger comes in when
Yeah.
when the teaching or the
Hmm.
preaching is all about self and it's all about deliverance, and it's not about Jesus Christ. Then that gospel, that
Exactly.
teaching is perverted,
Right.
and that is a fact. Because if you look in the book of Acts,
Right.
Paul says, "Preach the full counsel of the gospel." A gospel without the name of Jesus Christ. And if the gospel is about how you can heal and how you can do this, all about I, and then everything personifies you, then that is a problem. That is a perverted gospel. And of course, there are good teachers, there are good preachers, and people who preach the
Right.
gospel.
Right.
But there are people who
Hmm.
are there also to take advantage of the vulnerable or the gullible, those who just believe, and they want fast. They want fast healing.
Right.
They want everything
Yeah.
on the go. Tell me right now. And God detests fortune tellers, because if we look at some of them, they could be classified in that way. I'm not classifying chroma in that way. I'm not
Right.
saying so.
Right. Right.
Okay,
Right.
but I'm just saying overall. But again, I believe that the apostles, those that came after Jesus Christ, they were trained to teach exactly what Jesus taught them, that what Jesus gave them the Great Commission: go and tell and teach, go to the world, to all nations and
Right.
teach
Right.
and baptize. So we ought to teach for people to learn about the life, conduct, and character of Jesus Christ, who he is, a man full of compassion, a man heart full of love. What does it mean to have genuine love in your heart for your fellow man? And that is why it's lacking in Liberia today. We don't love each other. We tend to hate and play envy and play games, manipulate and lie. So corruption is not just coming on the forefront, it starts from the heart. And that's what
Exactly.
Jesus said. If the heart is not right in, that's how everything comes out. And looking at talking about stampede and people dying at a Christian worshiper, worshiping a place, a crusade. Then those who are saying, well, maybe something is not right. I mean, I'm not here to speculate, but what I'm saying here is that there's nothing wrong with going to a crusade. But at the same time, if you are a believer in Jesus Christ and you know that his atoning work has saved you, you are saved. And if you want to improve your spiritual life, all you have to do to bear that fruit is to study the Bible, Be a disciple of the path, not to be a just a follower, but learn the Bible for yourself. Get teaching, because sometimes you can never tell, and especially if you don't read the Bible, study the Bible, you can never tell who is telling you the truth or who is not telling you the truth, because they
Yeah.
got false prophets, they
Oh
got
yeah,
false
most
teachers.
definitely.
Reverend Deddeh, right? They got false teachers, and we
Yes,
can see
sir.
that in Liberia. It was apparent in the race, the senatorial race between Representative Fala and Senator Dillon. Remember what happened, right? There were these bishops that came together, about 60 something, and laid hands and put oil on this
Right.
Fala head, right? And showing him that was going to win. And Dillon beat him, what? Landslide. So again, just be very mindful. God call us, yes, we can go to crusade, but stick with your church. Go to your
Right.
church and go to Bible study, go to Sunday school and learn the Bible for yourself. If you can read, yes, people there to break it down, but just reading one line, some pastors read one line, and then everything is that personal opinion. So we must just discern the difference between personal opinion and the fact of God's word. If that pastor is preaching in context of that word and what he's saying, whether it is true. And that's why we need to learn. Sorry, I'm going my soapbox here, Reverend Deddeh. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to give you a chance to go ahead because there's a lot to be said about this situation. But, gentlemen, one thing I think we've learned from this episode is that there has to be times where the government will have to implement rules. The justice ministry has been the one issuing permits. But I've engaged in open air crusade on Broad Street when I was back in Monrovia. We needed permit for the justice ministry to authorize that gathering. So there's nothing wrong with justice minister giving permit for people to gather. It's for security, for those who are organizing the crusade, and for those who are attending the crusade. That's what that is for. So with the incident in Nuclear Town, somebody dropped the ball, or maybe they did not pay attention. But as the president said, they has to be investigated to see whether there has to be rules governing whether or not people should be given permit, or in terms of crowd control, in terms of how many persons should attend to those crusades and the rest of that. But I believe that there should be rules on the books already that Stanford said. It is not the shortage of regulations, it's the willingness, the desire, and the commitment to implement what we already have on the
Yeah.
books. Now, Liberians, we are our own problems. Let's face it. We talk about dirt on the street. Who put a dirt on the street? Us. Okay, but is it because the MCC does not have enough dump site or places to throw dirt? Is that why people throw dirt on the street? So there are multiplicity of questions we keep asking ourselves. Why do we have this kind of situation? When it comes to the scripture, gentlemen, the Bible is clear. The time will come when people have itching ears to hear what they want to hear. So right now, stand for you, right? People want to hear about miracles and things like that. So if any man of God comes and talk about miracles, and you're an apostle, and they say you working signs and wonder, they will flock to your crusade. There's nothing wrong with that. But let it be order. Let it be crowd control. Let it be rules and regulations how these things are organized, so that we do not have 29 or 30 plus Liberians dying for a crusade. You want to serve God for God's sake. You want to serve God. And that happens, then the question is God wicked? No, God is not wicked. You know, God gives us his permissive will and divine will. If you choose permissive will and do what you want to do, it's not God's causing that happening. It's you, your decision that cause that to happen. So we learn from this thing now, I think, sufficiently to not just allow things to just happen the way things should be happening, but rules should be applied, regulations should be applied. What should be done for this kind of big threat to come should be satisfied, so that we don't have this kind of situation again. As for the disadvantaged people, we all agreed that we need to pay attention to them, but that does not give them any leeway to
Mhm.
come anywhere with machetes and cutlasses and put fear in the people to cause the stampede and people die. I mean, this should not be happening in our country. This enough is enough. Seriously.
Yes, and it is true that that we are discussing this because there are other viewers out there who are concerned about a lot of other things. Um, that this Victoria Marbe says, we like to look to men for deliverance and miracles than being a true Christian and working hard for your own daily bread. Let's be careful, because There are many false prophets. Of course, God wants us to learn to pray for ourselves. Of course, attending crusades not it's not a bad thing, but take precision to know whether the place is safe, and that's true. And also here,
Yeah.
before we go here, Reverend Deddeh, this question is to Mr. Stanford too. If God is a true God and He's sovereign and He has control over everything, and a preacher who draws a lot of people like Prophet Krumah, why is it that God allowed that those deaths to take place? Why? Why He couldn't stop it? What would you tell people that? What would be the answer? If
And
that
it's,
was a man of God who did deliverance and everything, and then people leaving now, and then they feel panic because they heard the bad news about robbery of Zocos, and then He allowed all those people to die, and people trample upon them, and kids die. Why?
Stephen, you want to go first before I comment?
Actually, I don't have an answer for that. Really, so you can go ahead with that.
Okay.
I mean, I have some very metaphysical answers, but no real religious. God makes us willing. Like that's one of the things I've heard since it makes us willing to do. He can't come and change. Otherwise, he would never have let Pastor Krumah be born, or he would never have let anybody go to that place they went. So he makes us willing to do what we want to do. He gave us brains. He gave us discernment. So he can't come and control all that stuff. But religiously, I will leave that to Pastor Deddeh.
Yeah, leave that to me. In every situation, God says in His words, His ways are not our ways, our thoughts
Right.
are not His. So when things happen amongst us and around us, we cannot easily read the mind of God. But one thing we know for sure, if anything happens that we say maybe God allowed to happen, because God knows everything before they even unfold. He knows everything. But there are reasons why things happen sometimes when we break our own rules and our regulations. Then things happen for us to learn from those situations, and we blame God.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what happened in this
Exactly.
situation. So God says, govern yourselves accordingly. Make sure you respect constitutional authority, Romans 13, and we disregard all those things. Then the consequences of those sin, that for instance, David sinned. God forgave David, but the son that David had with Bathsheba died. Why? Because that was the consequence of that sin. So what am I saying? I'm not saying it's because of sin. People wanted to crusade and they died because of sin. No, I'm saying if you don't follow the regulations that God even gave us to follow, when things happen, we get the results of what happened. It is sad people die. Now, take for instance, Stanford and Ellis. If there was adequate security at that entrance, then nobody enters without being searched. And they were ready for any eventuality, Zogos or no Zogos, or disadvantage or no disadvantage, they would not have entered that place. No way. They would have been stopped at the entrance. That did not happen. Secondly, if you are the leader of a crusade, you should make sure that that place is protected. You have security around because you know people coming. That did not suffice. So we want to blame God for that. God says, your ways are not my ways, my thoughts are not your thoughts. As far as the east is from the west, that's how your ways are not my ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. So that's what it is, Ellis. We cannot blame God for what happened because people
No.
died. No, it's our own situation that caused that thing to happen. But mind you, God
Exactly.
still loves us. He still loves us. He says He will never leave us nor forsake us. He promises to be with us all through the end. So not everybody died. Why? To have a message and a testimony how they were saved from that situation, to teach others to know that yes, people died, but God saved people so that we learn from our lesson and make amends.
Yes, and I'm glad that was a very good answer.
Right.
And they asked Jesus Christ the same question when they went to a desolated temple, and they asked Jesus, "This temple was standing, but look at that day. It was one day they were worshiping, and the whole temple fell, and everybody died." So they asked Jesus, "Is it because of that sin that they die, other than perish? God allowed that to happen, or is it because?" Um, they just died. It just happened like that. So then Jesus took the same question they asked and asked him back and said, "What if you were in there? Will you be grateful that you're alive?" In other words, Christ was saying, you are blessed that you're alive. Why it didn't fall on your head for you to die? So the thing is, when you have the breath of life, and all those who survive that stampede should thank God for His grace to allow them to live, so that they can tell the testimony of what happened. And things happen when we don't know at times why it happened. We don't have answers, because God is a sovereign God, and He knows why He allowed in His permissive way for things to happen. And but when it happen, when those things happen, we are to um, look up to Him. We may be looking for answers, but at the same time, we may not have the answers. But we can be grateful with a thankful attitude and say, God, look, you spare me, and I'm alive, and I'm still alive. I still eat, and I still do the things that I need to do. I have breath of life. So that is a testimony I believe that we all can learn from what happened. Not that we should justify in any way that those people died because they had to die, or because God caused them to die. No, it happened because we don't know why it happened, but it happened. But we can now be witnesses and the testimony, and give testimony of those who in fact survived, those who survived, those who are the same who survived. We'll be having, maybe later on, seeing them maybe on television or some places. We'll be talking about what they actually saw and what happened, how they were spared, or how they escaped death. And that, of course, will make us to be more grateful and closer to God. Say, God, you still got me alive. My friends are gone, but I'm still here. Have you seen some of your odds? Know? Do you know that some of your friends that you went to high school with, some of them passed on, and you're still alive? And then
Yeah.
you sit back and say, wow, why am I still alive? A wretched man like me, you know, and God, is working through me, His grace through me. But there's a reason and purpose why God is working in each of us life, because God gives His mercy and grace at a certain measure to each of us. So we must be thankful at the same time in everything. At the same time, yes, God has given us the intelligence, He has given us the skills and abilities so that we can avert what happened. And He makes it very clear that you are my people, that you should humble yourself, obey, pray, and forsake your wickedness. And in our country today, and we've been saying this over and over, our problem is what? A spiritual problem. It's a spiritual problem, and that is why we always seek help beyond ourselves. We may enact all of the laws and do everything possible to prevent what happened in the future. But at the same time, let our hearts be turn to God, who is the sovereign creator and the provider. Um, Reverend Deddeh?
Yeah, Ellis, before we go, somebody sent me a text asking for the scripture when I talk about itching ears. So it's 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3. It talks
Mhm.
about, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but having itching ears, they shall heap to themselves teachers in accordance with their own lust. This is the word of God. So the itching ears lead people to all sort of things, especially believers want to find answers, quick fix answers to issues they may be faced with. So they find anyone who is ready to say they have solutions to this problem. So they want to
Mhm.
satisfy the desire of the itching ears, so they go. So again, not everybody who went to that crusade just wanted to have quick fix solution. They sincerely wanted to serve God and have the peace of God in their hearts. But things happen, and I believe some of them survived. Of course, they survived, and some died. But in a situation, the scripture says again, give thanks in every situation, because that is God's way concerning you in Christ
Mhm.
Jesus. Oh, really? God wanted us to die at the crusade? It happened. So those who survive will know, like you said, and I already mentioned, that they will know that indeed God saved them for a reason, for a purpose, to give that testimony so that His name can be glorified in Christ Jesus. So I just thought to make sure I mentioned that scripture.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, and of course our guest just went off. Okay, he's back.
he's
Well,
back.
this is how we conclude here. Any final word? Something that you believe that we didn't bring up regarding this whole incident? Stanford, can you hear us? Stanford, can you hear us?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Any final word before we end the program here today? Do you have any word, anything that we didn't talk about or touch on that you would like to let the viewers know about? He's not hearing me. Okay.
Something's I think a delay frequency is going on right now.
Yeah,
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 something
that's
is
the
going
deal.
on.
Okay,
Something
well,
is going
folks, this is how we leave you here today. We are normally here every Saturday, the same time, 3 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. That's 3 p.m. Eastern Time. No, 3 p.m. Central Time,
on.
4
Aha.
p.m. Eastern Time, and
Okay.
then 9 p.m. GMT Liberian Time. And this is the Gracious Hope live podcast on KMTV. KMTV, we are everywhere. If we put it to the test, we beat the rest. And this is how we like to say thank you so much for being here. Let's see here. Uh, okay, Sanford, can you hear us now? He still has problem. Okay, but that's how we'll leave you here today. And of course, we'll be back here. What next Saturday? My name is Alexander Red, and of course, our special guest for today here has been Mr. Sanford Bush Chicken Peabody, who is a consultant in agro business in Liberia. And of course, we'll be back in next week. Thank you so much, and may you have a blessed day, and of course, a blessed weekend.
Thank you,
Take care.
Stanford. He has an issue right now. Mm.